Hello and welcome to Virtual Insanity, Teaching During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I am Dr. Jason Lee Guthrie, coming to you from Clayton State University, just south of Atlanta, Georgia.
And I'm Stephen Potaczek, and I'm coming to you from Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama.
So our presentation is going to cover two different aspects of teaching during COVID-19. In my case, I needed to figure out a way to teach completely online, a podcasting course. And in Professor Potaczek's case, he needed to figure out how to navigate teaching music production in person with all of the safety protocols in place. So I'll kind of begin from my perspective. As we all know, I mean, teaching any sort of media production online is a really fraught undertaking. We are all really used to having the benefit of being one-on-one and probably didn't realize, just how much we took that for granted until COVID-19 forced us to rethink so many of the things that we do. I did have some previous experience teaching graphic design online, at least. I could say that of all media production, that's probably one of the easiest because students are pretty much just staring at the screen, whether they're watching Photoshop tutorials or they're working in Illustrator or whatever it may be the entire time. So there's not really the field component, and that certainly could help. But teaching podcasting online was another animal, certainly. We're going to dive in just a bit in my part of the presentation to a specific tool that I used to do that. But I did want to just mention some more general online pedagogy things that I had pulled from my previous experience that I think worked really well. In an audio podcasting course, obviously I had students listen to a ton of podcasts. And so those really form the basis for our weekly discussion forums and for, kind of deeper levels of analysis. And I think that really helps students. I was surprised to find that, as recently as maybe 3 or 4 years ago, trying to teach a podcasting class, I would have a lot of students interested, but many that said that they had never even listened to a podcast. In 2020, almost all of them said that, yes, they were listening to podcasts, but the vast majority of what they were listening to were the really big names, Joe Rogan, for example, and then just, little things that their friends put out. And the commonality between those two, I mean, there's certainly a very different level of production value, but they were almost exclusively interviews and not necessarily well edited, in the case of their friend ones. I mean, that was kind of their only understanding of what podcast genres could be. I did have a few that would listen to like comedy. But I really tried to pull in from a very wide range and expose them to the vast array of the podcast genre. And then the other main thing that really helped was really sequencing the assignments and having them build towards a podcast pilot package at the end. I think that students can benefit from heavy structure or thick structure, as it's sometimes referred to in various project-based learning pedagogies. This being the first time I taught the class online, the first time I taught the class at this institution, I didn't want students to feel limited, and I wanted them to kind of come with their own creativity. So I did allow them to pick the topic for their final projects, sort of knowing that often the quality will be a little bit less if it's not more scripted, but just want them to be excited about it. And that it pretty much lived up to my expectations with that. But so I really, there was kind of an introductory unit where I just had them get comfortable with the tools, with some basics. interviewing each other and doing just a short podcast episode. And then from there, I had them, build towards a podcast pilot package that included obviously a final pilot with a transcript, but it also included a logo, a marketing one sheet, a trailer, things like that, so that they would kind of have a full cohesive thing to show. And now I want to show you the primary tool that I use to make this class work online. I'm coming from a department of visual and performing arts, so we've got music, film, theater, an art minor, all together with my home department, which is communication and media studies. That means that our space, especially classroom space, is very limited, and our resources were really stretched. So we needed every course that could possibly go online to go online, especially for our film program that had to do things in person, just to accommodate their social distancing and all those kinds of things. So one of the first things that I needed to do was identify a tool that would allow us to do podcasting online. And what I ended up going with was a browser-based audio editor called SOUNDTRAP. This is a Swedish company that was started in 2013. It was acquired by Spotify in 2017 as part of Spotify's ongoing push to sort of take some market share away from Apple in the podcasting space. There's no download required. This was huge for us, for our students. We have a lot of students that are working with really inferior technology from home, some that only have Chromebooks. I had one student that tried to do the entire class on their phone and then a little bit on their roommate's computer. And so this was a tool that had the basics of what we needed, but sort of had that equity built in. There is a companion mobile app as well, and it will record to the cloud, so you can record stuff on your phone and send it straight up to the cloud, where you can edit that later on a laptop, which is really nice. And it was also really affordable, which was a big thing for our particular institution. Education licenses are only $5 a student. The minimum is just 50 students, so $250. You can get going with SOUNDTRAP. So I just wanted to kind of go through a little bit of the particulars here. From the login screen here, you'll have a list of projects, and if you just click Enter Studio there, it's going to pull up in your browser a DAW, a digital audio workstation. So as you can see here, when you set up a new project, the very first thing it's going to ask is, do you want a music project or a podcast project? So it is really geared to do both kinds of things. I'm going to be focusing mostly on features that are a little bit more relevant to podcasting. When you add a new track, you can choose your microphone, and this is going to work with whatever you have that's available, whether the innate laptop microphone or webcam or USB or even something plugged in through an interface. You just give it permission there. And when you set up your tracks, it's going to set up like this. It makes a nice visual waveform, as many DAWs do, which I think is helpful for students. You can do all sorts of things as far as editing with those by right-clicking on that. You can change the presets. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the default podcast preset. I like to just go up and use the clean one. Another really nice feature, and something I think that set SOUNDTRAP apart a little bit from some of the other various competitors out there, you can interview right within the DAW, and you actually can see each other. It only records the audio. And it does, I think, an above average job of recording the audio because it's only using recording resources to record audio. It's not also trying to record the video. It's one of the things with Zoom. It has to compress the files so much because otherwise a large video file would be really unwieldy. But just the fact that you can record is really nice, and it's nice to be able to see each other. That feature in particular will only work on a computer on a Chrome browser, at least so far. I'm sure it's something they want to add to the mobile app eventually. Some of the features that really made this super useful for my purposes, the share feature was really the crucial key as from instructor standpoint. So because everything is on the web and in the cloud, students could not just export their file and send it to me. They could actually share their project, their live project. So I can get into the project, apply some edits, record a screencast while I'm doing it, and send them a video. And then, of course, I'll save the edits to a new project. I'm not going to do it for them, but they can actually see me working on their project. And that really just helps to close that gap of not meeting in person. It also made group projects a lot more possible, and it reduces cheating opportunities, right? Because I can see what they're actually doing, what they're actually editing. This would also be a really useful software for a voiceover class, for an entry-level music recording or engineering class, and it's really super fun. I mean, there's just so many different things built into it that I think it's a tool worth sharing, and I hope that maybe it'll be of interest and of use to some of you as we continue to navigate what teaching these kinds of hands-on things looks like in the brave new world in which we're entering.
Thanks, Jason. Well, again, my name's Stephen Potaczek, and I'm the director of the commercial music program at Samford University in Birmingham. In our program, we've got a pretty diverse set of students. There's 4 different areas of concentration. The music business program, which partners with our business school as well. Students will come out with a major in commercial music and a minor in business. The performance concentration, songwriting, and music production. So I'm grateful because at Samford, there was a lot of work that happened that sort of set us up for success. So we had a committee from all across the school come up with 4 different scenarios of how things might look for the upcoming year in terms of best to worst case. We had Go Sam, which was kind of the best case scenario, which involved social distancing and masking protocols, as well as sanitation stations everywhere and traffic flow throughout the building. Safer Sam, which had some more active prevention measures involved. Contain Sam and Home Sam. In all 4 of these situations, we had very specific ways that we would flesh it out in terms of the resources required, what it would take for faculty and staff, and what it meant for our schedule. I'm really grateful to say that we only had to live in 2 of these worlds. We started the year off in Safer Sam, which was a little bit more intense, and then we finished the year off with Go Sam. A couple things that our university did specifically was our rooms were significantly the amount of attendance available for those rooms was downsized so that we could accommodate the 6-foot social distancing protocols. And so rooms that would house 50 to 60 students for a class were dropped down to, 10 students, 12 students, and even less if there was singing involved in the class. As a result, some of our larger classes and labs and things had to happen in performance spaces. Thankfully, we've got some pretty good performance spaces in terms of recital halls and concert halls, theaters, things like that. And then the other thing we wanted to make sure to do was contact tracing. So especially in any space where a student would be touching things such as a tech lab, a computer lab, or a practice room, we had QR codes that students would scan when they came in so that we could do any sort of contact tracing as well. So again, our heart with this is really to be more of a conversation and less, more didactic here. And so I'm only going to share with you what really worked well for me and in our setting. But we would love to hear from you in our discussion time what worked well for you, maybe even what didn't work well. We can share some horror stories as well. For me, 2 essential tools: Canvas. Our school has been on Canvas for a while now, and if we weren't fully utilizing it before, holy cow, were we now. We really used everything except for video conferencing within Canvas because we just found that it wasn't as effective as Zoom. But discussions, chatting, collaborations, all those things, a lot of things that were paper-based or maybe in analog were converted over to digital so that we could really make this work no matter what scenario we found ourselves in. Something on Zoom, we started off with WebEx, and that ended badly for WebEx. So we decided to switch over to Zoom. And the one thing I'll tell you about Zoom that I found to be really helpful when I was teaching online was the breakout rooms. If you're not familiar with this feature, highly recommend taking a look at it. Breakout rooms allow you to have small group conversations, which is so much better than the constant talking head that really has Zoom fatigue built into it. So I would frequently have students mull on a question or some sort of topic for them to discuss in a breakout room, and then we would come back together. That really allowed for a much more effective pedagogical approach. 3 creative online tools that I found to be really helpful for me in my approach. The first of which many of you are familiar with, but Kahoot. It's a quiz format that you can use for assessment of learning, and where students might need to continue to do more review before some sort of summative assessment. Kahoot's awesome. I love it. You can use it in the classroom. You can use it when you're all a million miles away. And it uses your cell phone as sort of a buzzer where you can select the correct answer. What a great format and a lifesaver to keep things fun in the midst of a very serious time in our lives. The second of which is I frequently would find myself having students do asynchronous coursework, and so that would involve watching a video or something. But let's be honest, how do you know if your student's watching the video? How do you know if they're paying attention? How do you know if they're not even taking a shower while the video's going in the next room? Edpuzzle allowed me to really keep tabs on things. Basically, Edpuzzle allows you to put stopping points in any video. So you could have a YouTube clip and it would stop at, say, 26 seconds, and then it would force them to answer a question based on something that they just heard, and they couldn't move on until they answered the question correctly. So Edpuzzle really helped to make sure that students were paying attention and that we were getting the most, sort of the best in the worst case scenario. And last but not least, Flipgrid. A lot of times we tend to resort towards writing papers for response on something a student might have read or watched. And I just found that, I want to give students the option to video themselves and to discuss things more, or to be able to present in this sort of a format. So Flipgrid allows you to post a question or to have them watch something, and then they have to post a video response, and they just use their cell phones. And I found that the engagement in this was significantly higher than if I only resorted to, writing papers and things like that. Last, I'll share with you a few creative assignments that I found helpful. Some of these were things that we probably would not have been able to do or wouldn't have been forced to do, I guess I should say, if we weren't in the pandemic. The first is that I had students create a virtual concert. Obviously, with where things are at in the industry, we couldn't do live shows, so creating a virtual concert was very doable. I had the entire class do a virtual concert where every single student had a job. Some were promoters, some were performers, some were audio engineers, some were video engineers, lighting, all these sorts of things. And they were given, I think, 4 to 5 weeks to put this together and to promote it and to launch it. And I'm really grateful to tell you that it's one of the most successfully attended events that any of our music students have put on. So it was a great opportunity for students to really get their hands, in the soil, so to speak, of doing a not just concert promotion, but virtual concert, which has really taken off, obviously, in our industry. The second thing is a lot of our students may be familiar with creating content. They might be familiar with promoting content, but I can honestly say that I hadn't done a ton of both. And so we created a marketing assignment where they had to create a 20-day promotional strategy, where not only did they have to create a marketing funnel, but they had to implement it. And so maybe day 35 was setting up a Spotify pre-save, or day 7 out from the release was to release a teaser video from the studio, something like that. So they had to have a very concrete plan. I thought this was really helpful because so many students I know are so good at one or the other, but doing both is really important for success. And I think they got a lot out of that. And last but not least, we did some incredibly cool interviews that we probably would not have been able to do. So many folks, unfortunately, were home, in our industry. They were not able to be out on the road. They were not able to work like they usually do, which is unfortunate. But what it allowed for us to do is to have access to them that we probably wouldn't have had. We spoke with several music producers and engineers, booking agents, promoters that we probably wouldn't have had as easy access to. One in which that I'd love to highlight is Leland Sklar spoke with us for an hour and a half, talked about what it's like being a gigging musician with artists like James Taylor, Phil Collins. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's a legend in the industry for the past 50 to 60 years and has really been on the road his whole life. And so he loved talking with us, and in his words said, hey, it's better than sitting around watching the grass grow. So in summation, I think there's a lot of cool things that could have been done. And I think the pandemic forced us to do some cool things. So I'd love to hear from you. What works for you? What didn't work? And what questions, if any, do you have? Thank you so much.